Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Startup Grind this morning, or this afternoon, or even this evening, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Christina Savannah, and I am the Marketing Director for Spark Center. So today's event is brought to you by Spark Center in partnership with Queen's University. Spark Center is a regional innovation center in Durham region. And as the Eastern Ontario chapter of Startup Grind, we're thrilled to bring you these monthly events to inspire, motivate, and challenge you. So first, I'd like to take a moment to thank Spark Center's elite partners, Bearskin and Parr LLP, Finance Without Borders, RDP Associates, Leighton, Suresh Law, and Real Estate Refreshed. These events would not be possible without the support of our elite partners, so thank you. Now, the interview portion of today's event will begin shortly, but don't forget to stay tuned after the interview for networking. If you haven't tried networking on this Hopin platform before, it's fun, it's easy, and it's a great way to meet some new faces. So lastly, before I welcome today's moderator to the stage, I want to encourage you all to visit the sparkmagazine.ca and subscribe. You can subscribe for a print and or digital copy. Our spring 2023 issue is all about how Ontario is becoming a powerhouse in electrification and mobility solutions and will be released in the coming weeks. The media kit is also available on the website. If you are interested in advertising, there are several opportunities to do so. And you can check out the lineup of themes that we have for the coming year. All right, let's get into it. Today's moderator has been a Spark Center client and a previous Startup Grind speaker himself. So I'm thrilled to welcome Asif Khan to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Christina. Appreciate all your opening comments and introductions. So I'm excited to be here and to be part of this and to be a part of Startup Grind once again, this time as your moderator. So I've been a startup entrepreneur for more than 20 years, building a number of startups, currently based in Durham region with my latest company, GroundLevel Insights. And so we're a company that takes huge quantities of anonymous mobile geolocation data from everyone's phones and then uses AI to look for patterns in how people are moving about in the world and where they're going, and helping businesses like retailers and restaurant chains and sports teams understand, who their clients are and what else they're into and where else they hang out besides, those businesses directly. So, I'm excited about today. I'm excited about where things are going in Eastern Ontario and Durham region and the growth of tech overall in the region. And Spark Center has been a huge part of that and a huge part of what we're doing at ground level. So thanks for the opportunity. So I'm looking forward to chatting with today's guest with a PhD in physics, specializing in computation electromagnetics, plus 18 years of service in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and an assistant professor of physics and space science at the Royal Military College of Canada. It's no wonder that Dr. Desjardins has his finger on the pulse of computing innovation for data scientists, DevOps engineers, and computation scientists. So I'd now like to welcome the co-founder and CEO of Distributive, Dr. Dan Desjardins, to join me on stage.
Good morning, Asif. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to join the grind this morning.
Yeah, great to have you here, and I mean, even just your intro, Dan, is a mouthful. I mean, so much background and experience there. But I guess to kick this off, the first thing I'm interested in is, as an entrepreneur myself, built now 5 startups. I'm always interested to know, is this like, your startup and where you're at today in your career? Did you always have an entrepreneurial streak, or is this something that kind of came along later after, your time in the military?
A bit of an atypical story. No, by my background, you can tell that I've not touched business. Always heavy on the technical and the partial differential equations and flying aircraft. Nothing to do with business. In fact, it was so foreign and alien to me that it was at a barbecue dinner where a local friend and serial entrepreneur was talking about convertible debentures and all these words. I was like, "What is that?" And eventually. Said, well, I'd like to get into business one day. And I was sort of talking half seriously just because I found it interesting. And he replied, well, what you do in physics is interesting. I like the science and everything else. And so we created this bond over, call it a crossover. So no, it was very serendipitous how I got tapped on the shoulder, because Doug would later invite me to join Distributive in the very first early days. And so that's how I got into business. So completely out of serendipity. So did I have a streak for this early on? I have to say, no. Always entrepreneurial and gritty in going after objectives, but I never thought that one day I would be talking about cap tables and founding members of a company and raising capital and everything else. So it's been a journey building from scratch and learning from scratch.
Yeah, I'm sure it has, and yeah, and sometimes the best kinds of companies are born out of these sort of serendipitous moments, right? And exchanges, where it's completely unplanned, and it just two things come together. I'm inclined to say atoms are smashed together and things happen, but I'm not the physicist, so.
Perfect.
But yeah, so let's. Before we jump into the company, tell me a little bit more about your background, your growing up, sort of your influences, that kind of brought you to where you are.
I'm going to date myself with by naming some of the movies that marked me, but Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, that laser, that gun, that the technology and the electric waves and everything else. It led to me as a really young child, my favorite toy becoming the vacuum cleaner, just because it kind of looked like it could be a laser gun if you used your 5-year-old imagination. And so I've always been attracted to gadgets and wires and electricity and everything else. Eventually, throw Star Wars into the mix and ideas of going to space. It's very compelling for a young child, right? To dream about expansive worlds, to explore and innovate. And so growing up, pursued things that took me closer to that space dream: aviation and space science and physics, all these things based around exploration. And so, yeah, it's just been a lifelong of reaching a little bit further, trying to understand a little bit more, and being curious. And that led naturally into doing research and trying to tread new ground in physics. And very quickly, I ran face first into a problem that a lot of researchers and explorers have, which is, sure, you might be good at physics or chemistry or mathematics or some very specialized field, but to express your problem to computers, and a lot of computers, so that they can turn around and answer your question is actually, now that's the domain of computer science, data center management, a supercomputer utilizer, and all that kind of stuff. And guess what? As mathematicians and physicists, we're not trained to use supercomputers. So there's been a bit of a barrier for me, and solving that barrier is something that allows me as a scientist to do more research and make tomorrow happen today: space elevators and nuclear fusion and low-cost energy and all that stuff. And that is the backbone of Distributive, is how can we make research and exploration cost-effective, more importantly, easy and accessible to everyone, and not just scientists, but even people in high school. As AI is automating more and more jobs, we're going to be seeing this shift in the future of work towards problem formulation and solving, rather than automated pattern application. And so the more we can introduce, coding is being introduced at younger and younger ages. Well, introducing the very next topic should be, okay, we'll take that code and now let's run it on 10,000 computers in order to unlock innovation everywhere for everyone. That's very much what we want to accomplish at Distributive. And it's, in a very personal level, it's sort of my journey of being blocked by not being able to innovate fast enough because I needed this compute power. By solving my problem, I hope to then go and solve everyone's problem.
It's fascinating, right? And so first of all, like the background and kind of the movies that inspired us and all of that. So I'm thinking about the next kid right now that's watching Ant-Man and the Quantumania, and
Yep.
think will be the next Dr. Dan Desjardins out there, solving problems. But Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of spreading the load across multiple computers and sort of decentralizing the computing power that's necessary to do some of these calculations and process these kinds of data. I mean, I think this is a problem that lots of companies have. Like even my own startup at ground level, like we're processing petabytes of information per day, and it costs a lot of money, and it's and it takes a lot of time, and it's difficult to do. And so I can see tons of applications for this. Maybe you could help us understand just a little bit about kind of how it's being used today in market, or a specific application that you can kind of point us to that can help us understand it.
I'm glad you gave that yourself as an example of a user of compute. And I'm one too, obviously, as a background, formerly as a physicist. In fact, 37% of SMEs spend over $12 million a year on cloud, predominantly for compute. And that's fueled by big data analytics, AI, ML, and advanced research computing. And cloud is a wonderful model. It brought a lot of savings to companies early on, in order to allow them to free themselves of having to buy, maintain, operate their own supercomputers in their basements, because that's expensive if you're going to buy all that hardware and then maintain it. And every 4 or 5 years, you need to refresh it. And electricity is not cheap either, when you're running these big data centers, in your building. So cloud was a wonderful proposition. He said, "Tell you what, we'll put all these data centers together under massive roofs, and we'll take care of all the power." And essentially, they consolidated the infrastructure component, and then just rented it out, sort of pay as you go model to industry. And it did help with some savings, but it's turning out in recent years to be more expensive than anticipated. And so there's a movement to repatriate, or look at repatriating some of these cloud workloads, because it isn't that cost, or it is cost effective, but it's, in some cases, it's not worth it. Um, what we do, what does Distributive do? Distributive does a couple of things. I'll say it simple, and then I'll say it complicated. So basically, we're trying to make it very easy for these researchers, these AI ML developers, these data analysts, to be able to say, okay, this is my problem, and this is my data. I need the insights to come out of this, and usually that involves a lot of processing power, which you accomplish by buying a lot of computers or renting a lot of computer time with one of the big cloud providers. Um, our statement is, well, instead of spending a lot of money on cloud, especially if you're a business with a couple of dozen computers already bought and paid for on your local area network inside your building behind your firewall, why don't you sweat that equity? Why don't you take those dozens of computers and turn them into your own on-prem cloud and use them to do the AML that you would be otherwise spending a fortune on cloud to do? Now, easier said than done. So what we've done at Distribute, now the complicated part, we've essentially rebuilt a type of Apache Spark complete ecosystem where we have the protocol and the worker agents and the module system and the schedule and all the software bits and pieces that operate in the background transparently, that do what we just talked about, which is take an AI researcher, ML researcher, they point a couple of lines of code at their data, at the analytics they want to do, and they just press go. Everything else in the background takes care of spreading the problem out across their dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, 5 dozen computers on-prem. All the crunching happens, and then all the results get fed back to them faster, cheaper, better, typical type of marketing pitch, right? And so where we've taken this to market, a couple of locations, I'll name three: manufacturing, hospitals, and universities. So in manufacturing, we've implemented a machine vision solution on top of this distributed computing layer. So we did some tests with a customer, so a pilot project where we showed that operationalizing a machine vision solution using Microsoft Custom Vision would cost about $160,000 a year. And we ran it for several days to extract these numbers. We ran it on our solution, and it cost $12,000 a year. So this drop from 160K to 12K opens up the floodgates, I think, for low-cost machine vision, not just for manufacturing, and that's, they deploy that for quality assurance and health and safety and ground operations and monitoring of 5, 6 different things to reduce waste and scrap and streamline efficiencies and so on and so forth. The same machine vision, you can implement this in airports, where you don't want that footage leaving the building for security reasons, but you still want to see if there's unattended baggage or stray carts or what have you, or heat maps of where people are congregating, or maybe someone disappeared into the bathroom for a suspiciously long amount of time. Or I don't want to get too big brothery here, but basically, machine vision has so many applications in so many industries, and dropping that from 160K to 12K, or by 92%, levels the playing field and allows everyone to get into this type of analytics. So machine vision on distributed computing is a great application. In hospitals, we are optimizing surgical block schedules. So all of the different permutations of the possible ways to do different types of surgical blocks in a given operating room at a given time, these blocks are competing with each other. The environmental teams have to run between the different rooms to reset, right, after a surgery. The anesthesiologist has to run between the different rooms, and so on and so forth. So there's competing interactions for resources and whatnot. So it actually turns into a logistics optimization problem, and these are computationally expensive. So hospitals are a great place for this. And then finally, which is my bread and butter, in universities and colleges, they have lots of computers that are idle, doing nothing. Hook those up together in under an hour and turn them into basically a high throughput supercomputing cluster that students and researchers can tap into to innovate and invent the wildest theories that they can imagine. And by now, government, police stations, lawyers, ophthalmologist clinics, precision medicine, so unlocking the value of sensitive data without moving it. These are all things that become possible when you have very low cost compute at the edge.
Fascinating. I mean, and I think all the examples you've given are really interesting. For me, the machine vision stuff that's an area that we play in ourselves. So I'm intrigued by that. We'll have to have a follow-up conversation for sure. So, but let's talk now about kind of the business itself. Like, how are you socializing this in the marketplace? How are you, promoting and letting people know that this is available? How can other, what tips do you have for other entrepreneurs that are listening in today? And by the way, as I'm referencing the audience, if you have questions that you want to ask Dan, please put those in the comments section, and we'll pick those up.
That's a great question, and we could spend like the whole rest of the time just talking about that. So, okay, part one: how did we get to where we are, and how are we socializing this and getting the word out? We've done some high-profile pilots with Engine and Digital Technology Supercluster. These are government-funded organizations that act as brokers and matchmakers between different stage companies, from the behemoths all the way down to newly incorporated startups and everything in between, but also university players and other government agencies. So they're a melting pot of stakeholders that share an interest in economic development and generating jobs and so on and so forth. And so for us, it was a perfect arena to get in and showcase our technology and our solution. And incomplete, by the way. Like, when we were doing this, it was a proof of concept pilot with technology that was, just ready to sort of prove some of the fundamental points. Because, as you know, nothing's just ready off the shelf. You don't appear out of nowhere one day with a ready off the shelf solution. You have to build that painfully over years and raising funds and everything else. But basically, when the solution was good enough to demonstrate, we applied with a proto customer to this body, NGen, which stands for Next Generation Manufacturing Canada. And so they focus and invest in projects and offset 50% in some cases the cost of executing some of these pilot projects. And that's where we're able to demonstrate 92 cost reduction to solve a real problem for a real customer. And ever since then, they've been able to share these findings online on their site, and it's generated over 8 inbound leads from actually relatively big companies who all need machine vision. And when they hear 92% less cost and footage doesn't leave the building, the first reaction is that's not believable. So they reach out to inquire, and then when we show how and why, and we defend those numbers, and we offer to do the pilots, it's then it suddenly becomes real, and can benefit many people. So that's what we've done. We've gone straight to communities of companies that exist around common objectives. We've proven our wares, and now we're growing and we're scaling, and we think this benefits everyone. It benefits the end users who reduce their bottom line, their costs go down. It's good for us as we're generating revenue and creating jobs. It's good for the government because the more companies that are reducing their costs allows them to grow and be stronger. So that just strengthens the whole economy. I mean, think about that. 37% of companies spending over $12 million a year on cloud. What if you divide that by 5 or 7 or even 10? What does that do for everyone's margins? Ability to hire, retain talent, and grow and thrive, or outprice their competitors elsewhere, right? So it's a win-win suggestion. Now let's go up a level. How about all those tech consulting firms, systems integrators, systems operators, and solution providers? What if we equip them with a technology that acts as a complementary alternative? It's not cloud or us. We actually interoperate perfectly well with cloud. What if we equip them with an additional tool that they can then go to their customers and say, well, we've got a solution you might be interested in. Now they're getting value for the fact that they can reduce their clients' costs as well. So this is like a technology that we see as raising all tides.
Yeah. So just want to kind of, and that all makes sense to me. And I think, sort of embracing these sort of programs and these government funding solutions to get pilots, off the ground and kind of, prove out the use cases. I think that's an important piece. And I think, if I look at my own journey, across 5 startups now, I would say that, one of the challenges that I've seen out there is that, especially in Canada, it's been difficult to sort of build something and get, sort of corporate Canada to, sort of be the early adopter, right? It's sometimes easier to go, to our friends down, south of the border and say, hey, we've got something, you want to try it out, prove it out there, and then bring it back home. And then everybody's happy. But I think that, if you can get these sort of, these partnerships in place and these government agencies, behind it, as your first customers, then it can go a long way to proving that out. And so I'm interested, like outside of, sort of Engine, and obviously you have a relationship with Spark and Queen's University, are there other partnerships or mentorship type of programs that you would recommend to some of the entrepreneurs that might be listening today?
First, that you bring a good point. Like, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge how important Spark and especially Queen's University have been to help us get our early start and still today keep acting as a forcing function. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their help. So, and then to your other question about culture, Canadian culture, the ability, what is the single piece of advice, recommendation, or wishful thinking maybe that I would want to impart upon everyone, captains of industry, but also young startups who will eventually become companies? I believe it should be ingrained in our civic duty to, in order to help grow our economy and create more jobs and participate in the spreading distribution of wealth and opportunity for everyone. I think it's important that more advanced companies, agencies, institutions take the slightly younger ones seriously, and give them some time of day, not all time of day, but some time of day to help them up. I think there's a lot of conversation, obviously, in the funding worlds about what's your moat. How do you pull up the ladder behind you? How do you not help anyone else? How do you capture your market and greedily, not allow anyone else to participate? that thinking is, I think, is maybe good in the early days of a company so that it can get its foothold and achieve critical mass. But once the company's established, I think it's critical to reverse that paradigm of thinking and act as a catalyst for others to come up. It doesn't cost much for, I think, for a big corporation or institution. Let's just use a bank as an example. They have so much money. If they spent 2 engineers worth of time for an afternoon just to test a young company's prototype, which will probably be riddled with, problems and so whatnot, just the fact that young company can turn around and say, well, it's been tested by this bank or this agency, this corporation, and this is the feedback we got, and we're going to change this and this and this, and that informs our go-to-market thereafter. That's worth more, in my opinion, than any help, improving a pitch deck or handing out a pamphlet that says, "Oh, go talk to these government funding agencies or whatnot." I think companies that more established companies giving some time of day just to test and provide feedback and dare to try a new innovation is the biggest help we can do for one another as a society. And there are two outcomes. One, it is an investment that went nowhere, and like 2 engineers for an afternoon that went nowhere. You can't use them, but at least this startup has a better direction of where they can go. Maybe they need to pivot, or maybe they need to tweak 5 things, and then they go on their way. If that's the worst that happens for that bank in terms of ROI for that afternoon, indirectly it can make all the difference, right? And that little startup can say, "Oh, this person did testing with us and they like it generally, and we can raise funding." In the best case scenario, that bank took a chance on testing an innovation, and all of a sudden say, "Wait a minute, there's a lot of value here," and then that could help. That could be a benefit to them. But what we find in reality is that there's a lot of risk aversion generally, and some of this innovation testing is going on, but not nearly as much as could be going on. Um, and I think that's an area for improvement across the board in Canada and perhaps elsewhere, where we should not be focused on pulling up ladders behind us. We should help. We should offer time to test and be open-minded and curious. This is the worst case. We provided feedback. Best case, we stumbled on an innovation that can be strategically important and help increase efficiency in sales or whatnot. So go out there, be brave, test, be
Yeah,
open-minded.
it's a mindset, right? Like, and I think if we can get corporate Canada to start thinking that way, right, that there's so much innovation out there in the marketplace, and if we only just take some time to to experiment and play, what we can glean from that, right? And maybe it's part of sort of as we rethink coming out of COVID here, what work schedules look like, and hybrid working and other things. Maybe that becomes part of the way we work. We set aside time for experimentation and testing, and in my mind it's play, right? It should be fun, right? It should be something that you're looking forward to, and there's some sort of challenge to it. Let's talk about the journey, and sort of, in my opinion anyways, you can't be an entrepreneur and not have made mistakes along the way that you learn from. So if you look back and you could do it all over again, what would you do differently, or kind of what was the least favorite part of the journey along the way?
You know what? Sadly, this lesson is a very recent one, and it's pretty late in the game. But you know what? I'll admit it anyway. If I could go back in time, I would learn to articulate and express things much simpler. I've been operating, and one could understand and hopefully forgive me for being a background as a physicist, for liking and reveling in complexity. I've equated complexity with sophistication, and sophistication with credibility, right? Especially when you're in a deep technical field, and that's not. I mean, I think that's a forgivable mistake, but ultimately, if you can't get your message across, if you can't explain things in simple terms, then you're doomed to spend twice as long, 3 times as long, or perhaps forever trying to get what you're doing off the ground. So if I could go back in time, I would coach myself or seek out coaching on how to be very, very clear and simple with what it is we're doing. We've built technology that allows researchers to take problems and spread them out into little pieces across many computers they already own in order to get the answers faster, cheaper, better than if they were using expensive cloud. That's it.
So it's the KISS methodology. Keep it simple,
Yes.
stupid. Right.
And it's so, and you know what? In 5 years later, I'm still learning. And you know what? Probably for the next 5 years too. Being able to boil things down and express them simply is the greatest challenge. And I can't echo that and emphasize that enough. If you think you're explaining what you're doing simply, you probably still aren't.
Yeah, I want to understand a little bit about your team. Tell me a little bit about kind of how you guys are organized and structured, from a developer point of view, or the makeup of your team, and maybe there's resources that you're looking for that people in the audience might be interested in.
When we started in that barbecue party, right?
Yeah.
A physicist and a serial entrepreneur. It was basically two people, and then we hired two developers off Craigslist. Right, so those were our humble beginnings and operating out of the kitchen. We've since grown to 40 staff here in Kingston, nice renovated offices with lots of whiteboards, and then plant wall and all the typical stuff. No foosball tables yet though. But basically, we're organized into 4 groups internally. We have the core team working on the core distributed platform. That's the main engine, if you will, that takes problems, splits them into pieces, calculates things independently, brings everything back together. It's general purpose. But we have a team on top of that called tool chains, and they build the next layer on top of that core foundational piece. So basically, these are software pieces that are bridges to existing popular applications like MATLAB, or in the machine vision use case, people are developing a lot of, let's say, torch vision models or YOLO models. Well, between the YOLO models and DCP, there's a bridge that has to exist. And so these tools that bridge existing popular tools to a distributed computing platform like our solution, that's in the domain of tool chains. And then finally, the third group on the tech side, so it's a three team tech piece, we have the AI task force, and they're building the solutions, the very tip of the spear that solve end user problems. And those solutions use tool chains that use the platform. So now you have this sort of like this 3-wagon train completed by, if you will, the engine compartment or the front, which is business development, sales, marketing. So together, we have these 4 teams that pull everything forward. And the business team goes and sets up like a fantastic project with University Health Network and Kreml Research Institute to do advanced genomics research computing. And that then imposes needs on the solutions team, AI task force, which has needs on tool chains, which imposes needs and features on the core team. Now, an important thing I haven't mentioned, our solution is built completely on web technology or web standards. And so what I mean there is Node.js, JavaScript, now we're getting into technical stuff, web GPU, WebAssembly, Emscripten. I'm sort of just creating a laundry list of things that people hear them and they're like, oh, I know that. That's where we'd love to chat with folks. Our CTO, Wes Garland, his name is literally on the monument outside of Mozilla in San Francisco. He helped build a lot of the core foundational technologies that underpin the web, or he's part of the communities and the standards bodies that brought them into existence. So we definitely have the right people and are excited to grow and bring on more. And again, why we're doing this is because we want to unlock the massive amount of latent compute power found in everyday devices and put it to work for all of the data science, machine learning, AI, research computing, physics, science, chemistry, astrophysics, and understanding how dark matter works, like all that stuff. It's done by a computer.
I mean, I have a question, and it's just popped into my head. So, like, would you say that when you say you want to access, all this sort of computing power that's available out there, would that include potentially mobile devices? Like, would it, could we think about, the data is sitting on my phone, but rather than it sitting in a cloud somewhere and me interrogating the cloud, I'm interrogating, thousands of mobile devices and sort of retrieving what I need from there.
This is precisely why we've built everything on web technologies. it allows us to tap into the computing power of any device that supports web technologies. And so when I say web technology, the browser is
Yeah.
just the tip of that web technology ecosystem. When I like TCP/IP at the very bottom of that pyramid is part of web technology. The browser is just how we view. It's the window through which we interact with the whole web stack and all the data contained within it. But by building on top of web technology, we get the security of online banking, right? Because billions of dollars have been put into making the web stack secure. Obviously, we use it to online bank. It has to be secure. We get the distribution of web technology. So where does the internet not reach, basically, especially with Starlink, and everything now? Like the internet is everywhere. It gives us interoperability and ubiquitousness. Like what device, IoT or otherwise, can you think that doesn't run the web? Fridges run the web now. Your watch run like everywhere. And in fact, we've done distributed computing. We've sent physics jobs to fridges, Tesla cars,
Right.
VR headsets, watches, phones, tablets. Obviously,
Yeah,
service.
I raise it because I don't want people to think it's just I've got a rack of computers in my cold room at the office, and this is what I'm going to turn into my own sort of internal cloud, essentially, using your software. Like it really is any internet connected device, essentially, that we can think about in this way.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we're coming closer to our time, but let's turn this now towards the next generation of entrepreneurs, people that might be listening out there. Kind of from your perspective, what are some of the biggest roadblocks out there, and if people have ideas that they're contemplating for their company and what they want to bring to market, how would you encourage them to approach that?
Challenge what you think you're bringing into the world. Challenge its value. If we all think our ideas are the best, right? But if there's no product market fit, which means if people don't want what you're building or don't need it, then you're going to fail. So I guess that's lesson number one. Nobody likes wasting their time. It's not the entrepreneurs and not the people you're trying to sell your thing to. So when you have a good idea, you do talk to the users. Don't spend $5 million building something to then show it to them and find out that people don't want it. And when people say, "Oh, that's cool," that's actually a very polite way of saying, "Yeah, I don't really need that." So make sure you test your assumptions. To test your assumptions, you have to have assumptions in the first place. So that's something that we're still working on as well. That all companies should be constantly working on, actually, because assumptions change. There's new assumptions, there's old assumptions. You have to replace them. So you have to be very clear. If you can't write your assumptions down on paper, then you don't have them. Okay, saying, "Oh, the market for this is huge," that's not an assumption.
Yeah.
It's saying that, "Oh, distributed computing libraries like ours, others that are out there, this is the monthly downloads, over the last 5 years. So, and these are the growth rates, the month-over-month growth rates. These are things that exist in the market across 10 other libraries. So those numbers, those assumptions, so that would help you figure out, okay, well, if we were to grow and be successful, what does that look like? What's the monthly download target? What's the growth, the month-over-month growth? Can I compare that to other existing products that are in a similar category? Because if you can point to those numbers, those download rates, those growth rates, then you can say, okay, well, what I'm doing is based on that, and then that's suddenly more believable. Okay, well, let's go one step deeper. What did the developers and owners and maintainers of those libraries do in order to achieve that growth? Okay, part of it is the quality of the product and the stickiness, but there's a lot of campaigning and advertising and awareness building that went into it too. How many people did it take, right, in order to do that? So these assumptions around growth and revenue and what it's going to take to get there have to be numerical and as much as possible compared with other projects and companies and entrepreneurs who've done something similar, or at least as proxies. If you can't write it down on paper, then it's not true. So be very numerical and measurable and defendable when you're putting down your hypotheses on paper, and from those flow revenue projections, and that is what you need to raise capital to build your company in the first place. If you have no defendable projections, which stem from defendable assumptions, then you will not be successful. No one will just fund your idea based on, oh, the market for this is huge.
Yeah, no, and I think, just to echo that, like, I think that it's not a bad thing. Like, a lot of sort of young entrepreneurs that I talk to, or wannabe entrepreneurs that I talk to, are like, oh, my idea is so great, and I got to get it out there before anybody else does, and nobody else is doing this, and it's not true. There's always 10 other companies out there that are doing something close, close or exactly the same as what you're doing. And that's not a bad thing, like, right? Like, that's a good thing, because then you have other people to validate against, other numbers to go and size the market against, and to show to potential investors, what the market looks like, right? So it's okay to be a me too, is how I think about it, right? From that point of view. So you mentioned investors, so let's just touch on that, because I know lots of people out there are like, well, how do we raise money for this? And, who do we go to? And what's been your experience around that?
To date, we're all privately funded by high net worth individuals and small family offices. So we're still working towards unlocking institutional investment. So we made over $1 million last year in revenue grants and projects, to include the engine project and our deployments in hospitals, and our projects with the manufacturers and airports. And so we've been very creative with government funding, IRAP and SHRED. These are excellent government programs that startups absolutely would be smart to take advantage of. MyTax and TechStars and whatnot. There's a TechNation. Sorry, there's a lot of money out there to assist. It's mostly all matching, and the work to get it is non-trivial. And here's something that took me a while to figure out as a really early startup. There's SHRED and there's IRAP is two really good government level funding pockets or pools of funding. First, you're a SHRED company, then you're an IRAP company. And what I mean by that is, as you're spending to build your prototype and you're doing your research and development, SHRED, which is designed to allow you to bring money back that you paid in taxes. And so it's sort of like an after the fact, oh, I've done this, meandering and prototype building, so I can get this money back as an incentive. IRAP is the other way around. IRAP, you have to say what you're doing ahead of time and break it down on projects, milestones, like who's doing what, on a waterfall, cascading, tasks, everything else. So it's a lot of work up front to justify what it is you're going to do. But there's something beautiful in this. First, you're a SHRED company. You're spending money to build your prototype and do market research and find your place as you're going to not just going to market, but even before then you're building your product. But when you get to a point where you're like, okay, I think I got the hang of this, now you start planning forwards and then applying for money from IRA. But you don't do that on day one, or it's more challenging to do that on day one. So our journey has been SHRED. And then as we acquired maturity and market understanding, customers and everything else, and people, then we were able to start planning and be more forward-looking, proactive than reactive, which allowed us to transition from SHRED to IRAP, because IRAP funding eats into your SHRED funding. So it's kind of like a beautiful progression, almost as if there's deliberate intent here in organizing these programs, which I'm being sarcastic. Of course there was. Mm-hmm. So as you transition from a SHRED company to an IRAP company, it's actually a nice sign of maturity. Where now you're proactive and you're planning everything and you're executing. And this is exactly what it takes to get up to the level of seriousness and product readiness that customers demand and institutional funders demand, and so on and so forth. So it's really excellent for companies to not balk at the amount of work and quote bureaucracy that goes into preparing for an IRAP submission. It's absolutely the best and most healthy thing that you can do, especially as a tech company. I feel it boosts that maturity and unlocks funds and gives you a clear plan that then you can execute. And then in terms of fundraising from individuals, I mean, we can have a whole separate talk on good angels versus bad angels, and so on and so forth, and what goes into that and what that means. But basically, I heavily recommend that founders trust their guts based on the people that they're bringing into the family, then into their circles, because if they bring good angels, those good angels will bring other good angels, because birds of a feather flock together. If they start bringing bad angels, those who are not thinking about who are not really interested in the long game or the impact or the value or the benefit, if they're just like, how do I get in and get out and have the maximum return in the shortest amount of time possible? That's important. Don't get me wrong. ROI is important. But if that's the sole focus, that's what I consider a bad or even dangerous angel, because they'll bring in all their friends that just want to get in, get out, kind of like a casino for adults, and they can drag down and cause a lot of problems for founders. So trust your gut, that lightning rod of for people. And if you don't have a lightning rod to detect people and their intent, then you better develop it quickly, because entrepreneurship is a game of people, and relationships, and most importantly, trust. So bring in people you can trust. If you can't trust them, don't bring them in.
Completely agree with that. Okay, we're getting close to the end of our time here. So again, if there's any like last questions from the audience, please put those in the comments. But like maybe just to wrap up, final question from me, Dan, is like where are you guys going from here? Like where's the sort of roadmap for the company take you? And is there any sort of final thoughts you want to leave with the entrepreneurs in our community?
Our end state is we're building to become the web standard for distributed computing. To get there, we need lots of adoption. To get lots of adoption, we need to get the word out. And to get the word out, we need good use cases demonstrating clear ROI for the different stakeholders. I alluded to this before. Machine vision is a big one for us in manufacturing and airport security. We're doing some fancy schedule optimizations, surgical block schedule optimization inside of hospitals, but they too could potentially be interested in machine vision. And then finally, within the academic communities, we're unlocking physics, astrophysics, biology, mathematics. And so that three-pronged approach in those three verticals, where we're doing direct sales and enablement, designed to collect the proof points to then turn to the systems integrators, systems operators, solution developers, and the tech consultancy firms. We want to bring them up to speed and equip them with our technology, with a platform that gives them ROI that then they can go to their customers. And so we want to adopt a go-to-market via channel partners, a train the trainer type ethos that will essentially enable hypergrowth of this technology, which deserves to grow. Because again, for cutting compute by 90%, the cost of compute by 90%, this is something that benefits everyone. And so we absolutely should be in a position, we are in a position, we are making that happen. That's where we go next.
Awesome. I love it, and I think there's so many applications for what you guys are doing, and I can imagine that there's a lot of entrepreneurs on this call today that are sitting there thinking, yeah, if I could cut my costs by 90%, that's what's going through my head. If I can cut my AWS costs by 90%, I'm like, yeah, I'm a much happier person. So we'll have to have a conversation about that later on, Dan. But yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot today. I mean, obviously, you're doing something really great here and changing the world, and you're coming at it from a very sort of, I think, interesting perspective about, how are we, giving back? How are we supporting our community? How are we creating jobs? And for me, that's very much part of our ethos too at GroundLevel in terms of what we're doing, why we decided to build a company in Durham region, because there's not a lot of tech companies in Durham region, and why not, embrace, the local talent that's there, and people, so people who live there don't have to commute to Toronto or Mississauga or somewhere else where the tech companies, or Waterloo where the tech companies are. So, I very much believe in that as well. And so, just thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today. Any final thoughts that you want to, give to the community before we close it?
Hang in there. Post pandemic and going into a recession, it's these are very grueling times. Some reports are coming out on investor pullback and everything else. This is it's a very good trial by fire moment, a crucible for all the young companies out there, especially tech, where the pullback is the highest. I believe that the companies that truly have something in value and have the grit to pull through, the ones left standing after this recession, however long it takes, will be the one. There'll be call it revenge investing. There'll be a lot of the flood of capital that will return will inundate the companies that are left standing, because the ones that are standing will have survived because they're actually providing value. And so hang in there. If you're building something valuable, and you believe it, stick to your guns, hang in there, because if you're still standing, it's testament to the value you're creating, and opportunities will abound two or even threefold, because you will have proven yourself through the challenging times ahead.
Yeah, believe in what you're doing. Don't give up on it. There's going to be tough times and there's going to be good times, right? And it's perseverance, right? So, again, we've been chatting with Dr. Dan Desjardins. He's co-founder and CEO of Distributive. Thank you, Dan, so much for sharing your insights with this group today.
Thank you for having me today.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Just as a reminder, this Startup Grind was proudly presented by Spark Center in partnership with Queen's University. And we want to say thank you again to Spark Center's elite partners, Bearskin Par LLP, Finance Without Borders, RDP Associates, Leighton, Surish Law, and Real Estate Refresh. The next Startup Grind is taking place on Thursday, March the 30th. So be sure to mark your calendar and keep an eye on Spark Center's social pages for more details and to register.